The Raiders pay tribute to a baseball legend and icon. That plus a whole lot more on Wednesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for June 19th, 2024.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe and follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available. As always, if you're giving us a look on YouTube, you know we appreciate that. The show grows each and every day. That's because of you. And, of course, my man Ari does a great job each and every day getting us on YouTube, looking good, sounding good. We shout him out. He's on Twitter at Ari Produces. I'm on Twitter as well, at your boy Q254. And, you know, we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line is 707-654-4693. Your calls and texts will come up at segment number 3 as we close out today's show. A lot of great feedback. We'll try to get as many calls and texts in as possible. Like I said, got a lot of the calls and a lot of the texts, but I'm definitely going to try to squeeze in as many as possible. Show might even run a little bit longer just because of that. Segment number 2, saw an article from ESPN about all 32 teams in the NFL and where their offseason ranked. Pretty surprising where the Raiders came in. We'll tell you about that. I'll try to make sense of it in segment number 2. Here in segment number 1, news and notes of the day, as I always do, and we'll go ahead and jump right into it after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms will apply. And off top, you probably would be surprised as this is not NFL related, but it's baseball related. And on Tuesday, we found out that the great Willie Mays, the Hall of Famer, the Say Hey Kid, passed away at the age of 93. And I know what you're thinking right now. Well, why are you telling us about a baseball player on the Locked On Raiders podcast? Well, the Raiders tweeted out, and this kind of lets you know how iconic Willie Mays is, right? The Raiders tweeted out, the Raiders family mourns the passing of Giants legend Willie Mays, an iconic figure in baseball and throughout sports. The thoughts and prayers of the entire Raider Nation are with the Mays family at this time. I thought that was really cool. I was on my ESPN show on Tuesday night, and the news broke just about an hour before I actually went on. And I promise you, outside of maybe 20 minutes of a 3-hour show, it was all dedicated to the life and times of Willie Mays. And at 93 years old, him passing away, not only was that obviously a big blow to the sports world, and we've had some tough ones, right? From Jim Otto, the late great Raider, obviously, from Bill Walton, who did it in the NBA, Jerry West, who was legendary in the NBA, to now Willie Mays as well. But on Thursday, there's actually a big tribute game. The Cardinals and Giants are playing at Rickwood Field in Birmingham on Thursday in tribute to the Negro Leagues. Rickwood Field is the oldest professional ballpark in the United States, opened back in 1910 and was the home of the Birmingham Black Barons of the Negro Leagues from 1924 to 1960. And as a teenager, 17 years old to be exact, Willie Mays played for the Black Barons before he made his debut with the Giants. That's actually coming up on Thursday. And that's going to be a tribute that was really going to be a tribute to Willie Mays and all the great players from the Negro Leagues. And obviously Willie Mays was going to be a big-time headliner of that, even though he only played with the Barons for a handful of games. But just going through and hearing from so many people about the life and times of Willie Mays, the original number 24, I tell you all the time, number 24 is my favorite number. That's because of Rickey Henderson in baseball. But before Rickey Henderson, there was the Say Hey Kid, Willie Mays. And for a guy like me that never got to see the guy play at all, obviously he was long done playing before I ever was even thought of. Matter of fact, he was in the Hall of Fame in 1979? I was 3 at that time. So obviously never got to see him play. But one, my mom being a huge Giants fan, obviously she understands the greatness of Willie Mays, and my grandfather was a big baseball fan as well, and so I know he would tell stories about Willie Mays and his greatness, and he used to always tell me, you got to learn to catch the ball and hit, because baseball is where it's at. He used to tell me that all the time, and I laughed just thinking about it. He had season tickets to baseball games. He used to take my mom and obviously her sisters and brother to baseball games, and he used to take me to the baseball games. He used to take me to the Oakland Coliseum all the time for the A's game. But Rickey Henderson was my guy. But before Rickey, clearly there was Willie Mays. But the one thing that stood out and why I really wanted to talk about him here on the podcast, again, I know it has nothing to do with the silver and black, and if you don't like it, I apologize off top, but I thought it was important, was every picture I saw of Willie Mays. Every video I've seen of Willie Mays, outside of him obviously making the great iconic catch that everyone remembers back in, 54 in the World Series, around that time. I might have the year wrong. I apologize for that as well. But you understand what I'm saying. Everyone has that image and has seen that image. Willie Mays making the over-the-shoulder catch, the underhand catch, and then flipping around and making the throw back into, to second base and everything. Just iconic play that will always live on in baseball history. But the guy always had a smile on his face. He always had a smile on his face. He was the ultimate showman. Like, he literally would put on a show every time he hit the diamond. Every time he was around other people, he always would put on that show, have a big smile on his face. Every time you see pictures of him, even at bat, it looked like he had a smile on his face, right? He just always was happy to do what he did. And so that's going to be a big game. I encourage you to check it out if you do have an opportunity. Check it out on Thursday against the Cardinals and Giants. Obviously, there's going to be a hell of a tribute now. There was already going to be a tribute, but now the tribute's going to be over the moon for Willie Mays as he passed away at the age of 93. So again, Rickwood Field in Birmingham. Of course, it's going to be a tribute to the Negro Leagues. Rickwood Field, the oldest professional ballpark in the United States, opened in 1910. So I thought it was really important to just go ahead and open up the show talking about the Say Hey Kid, Willie Mays, as I know there's plenty of baseball fans. There's plenty that recognize the great talents and who Willie Mays was, not only as a baseball player, but as a person and what he meant to sports in general. Also, one more little nugget I have for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast news and notes comes from finding out the dates of Raiders training camp. Jack Hammett Sports Complex is where it's going to take place in Costa Mesa. Look forward to being down there. The rookies will report on July 21st. The veterans will report on July 23rd. Antonio Pierce will speak for the first time on the 23rd just to open up camp, and the first day of practice will actually be July 24th. So if you look at the calendar right now, just about a month from now, we'll actually be talking about more activities. So we've got a little bit of time in between now and then, but that 4 weeks, as you know, will fly by. So that's something to look forward to. We knew it was going to be at the end of July. Had a pretty good idea of the dates, but the NFL released it on Tuesday, so now it's official like a referee's whistle. Rookies report on the 21st of July, veterans on the 23rd. AP will speak for the first time, and they'll hit the practice field on July 24th. They'll break camp around August 9th when they make their way to Minnesota for their first preseason game against the Vikings. Then they return to Henderson for the rest of training camp and their final 2 preseason games with the Dallas Cowboys and the San Francisco 49ers. But what did ESPN have to say about the Raiders offseason? It actually caught me by surprise, and at some point, it will stop catching me by surprise. We'll talk about it in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about the title sponsor of this show, which is Gametime. Gametime makes buying tickets to anything easier, right? I know the NBA Finals got wrapped up. Major League Baseball games, if you happen to be around the town and you want to go to a game, well, Gametime has got you covered. The Stanley Cup Finals, they're still going on, right? There's a return trip to Edmonton, so a Game 6 will be had on Friday. Maybe you're trying to make a trip to go see that. You can get great last-minute deals on just about anything, from sporting events, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever the case may be in your town or others. Gametime has you covered, not to mention last-minute deals. Save up to 60% off buying those last-minute tickets. They've got flash deals. They got zone deals, all-in prices. You can even see the view from your seat before you buy your ticket. So you can actually check it out, what it's going to look like as you sit in your seat, even though you're sitting in front of your computer and you're buying the tickets. They got the lowest price guarantee. Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. And also, Gametime has that ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with most flexible customer service policy in the ticket industry. Right now, just take the guesswork out of buying any tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create that account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. It's all one word for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create the account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. It's all one word, LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to talk about this piece that's out on ESPN right now from Seth Walder. It's on the ESPN.com. Plus, he graded all 32 teams' offseason moves, ranked them from 1 to 32. The Raiders came in at 31. He gave him a grade of a D, which is just one spot ahead of the Saints. And I know right now someone's thinking, Q, ESPN always dogs the Raiders. What do you expect? Why are you surprised? And then others will say, well, Q, you work for ESPN. You're probably going to back them up. You're going to defend them or this, that, and the other. No, I'm really shocked. I'm really shocked by that. And I guess at some point, maybe I won't be shocked anymore. And maybe it's just because I guess from the outside looking in, it looks like the Raiders aren't a very good team. But I think that they're a pretty good, talented team. Matter of fact, I think, and it's funny that this article came out and someone hit me up on our text line when I was on my radio show, Unnecessary Roughness on Raider Nation Radio 920, and was saying, oh, you need to interview Seth Walder. And I was like, oh, yeah, he's cool. I can get him on the show at some point. I didn't know that they had already read that article. That must have been the reason. Timing is great. That must have been the reason why they wanted me to interview him, was because they read that and they knew that he had the Raiders ranked 31st, gave him a D. And, it's like, I understand what he's saying, and I'll read it to you in a second, but I don't think that he understands where this Raiders team is and the talent that is really on this Raiders roster. Obviously, it's led by its defense, but the team is not a bad team. Like, the team has a lot of talent. Well, Seth said, first, they failed to secure a long-term solution or even a long-term hope at quarterback, though I don't knock them too heavily for that. Vegas entered the offseason in an unviable position of needing a quarterback, not having the roster to support a major signing like Kirk Cousins, and drafting last among a slew of quarterback-needy teams. First of all, the Raiders definitely had a roster and have a roster where they could have gone inside of Kirk Cousins or someone like that if they felt like that was the way to go, and they could have competed. And I think they could compete anyway. But Kirk Cousins going to Atlanta, you're telling me that Atlanta is in a better position than the Raiders? I don't think so. I think the Raiders could have easily went and signed Kirk Cousins if they wanted to, or gone after a quarterback. And hell, we're talking about lately on the show signing a quarterback like Dak Prescott if he becomes available, just because the Raiders do have a talented roster and maybe he would help put them over the end. But I digress. So it goes on to say, the Raiders could have traded up, but it would have been for one of the second-tier quarterbacks. In lieu of a long-term solution, they paid a non-trivial $15 million guaranteed to Gardner Minshew, though he's coming off a solid season in Indy. Instead, the real issue was what they didn't do within the context of not securing a quarterback. The team needed to recognize its non-contender status and should have shifted its focus into acquiring resources to set itself up nicely for when it can acquire a quarterback and become a contender again. So basically, what he's saying in a nutshell, he didn't like the addition to Christian Wilkins. He thought they overpaid for a defensive tackle, and didn't like that they didn't trade an asset to get in position to get a quarterback. Basically, he wanted the Raiders to trade Devontae Adams. So those were two of the big moves. And it's funny because I think about the offseason, and they didn't make a lot of offseason moves, right? And so that's one of the things. And I thought that they were going to be more active in the offseason. Anyone who's listened to this show knows that I talked about that, especially going back to the Combine, when Tom Telesco, the Raiders GM, said, yeah, we've got to be pretty active. Well, they weren't very active. They signed a couple key players like Adam Butler, right? That was big. John Jenkins, that was big. Even though they were just one-year deals, bringing those two guys back was pretty big for the strength of this defense. And then Christian Wilkins was a big deal. That was a monster deal. They did that right off the top. And all they did is make their strength that much stronger, right? And so to me, when he doesn't like that move, I'm thinking, well, why in the hell would you not like that move? The strength of the Raiders team is the defense. They were damn good when the season got wrapped up in 2023, and all they did is get stronger. All they did is give Max Crosby a better opportunity to dominate a game. All they did is set up Tyree Wilson to have an opportunity to dominate games. All they did is allow Malcolm Koonce to continue to evolve as he did at the end of 2023. Like, all the Raiders did is make their strength stronger. I don't know anywhere where that's not okay. Now, I get the whole quarterback conversation. Believe me, we all get the quarterback conversation, right? We've had that so many times. Yes, they could have traded up. We all thought, well, at least I thought, that they were going to be able to have an opportunity to. Problem is, Chicago wasn't trading, Washington wasn't trading, and the Patriots weren't trading. They were stuck at 1, 2, and 3. They were going with Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and Drake May, and they were comfortable with that. And I don't think anyone thought that Michael Penix Jr. was going to get selected number 8 overall by the Atlanta Falcons. 6 teams took quarterbacks in the top 12, right? There were 6 quarterbacks off the board by the time the Raiders got around there at number 13. So they went out and got the best player that they felt available to make their team better. Now, what we saw from Gardner Minshew, as he mentioned, he's coming off a solid season in Indy. Okay, so they signed a solid quarterback. His words, not mine. And then we saw Aiden O'Connell get better as the season went along after everything that he went through. Do I think that Aiden O'Connell's elite? No. Will I try to lie and blow smoke up your backside and say that Gardner Minshew is elite? No. But can they win games? Yes. Have I seen them struggle at practice? Sure. Right? All of that is true, but that doesn't mean that this team can't win games with their quarterback, right? That's the thing about it. I know that they have to have a full team effort. I get it. Don't have the quarterbacks that are going to be able to put a team on their back and just carry them. But you're telling me that they're the 31st ranked offseason, the Raiders? 31st ranked when they went and got the best defensive tackle available to go with that bloodthirsty pirate that is Max Crosby? Like, how do you make a team that is so strong defensively now, make them that much better, and then you don't give them any kind of love? Like, for the longest, when the Niners didn't have a real quarterback solution, guess what they did? They had a very strong defensive front, right? Their defensive line was full of first-rounders, right? Full of guys that can get after the quarterback. And then, yeah, they ended up getting quarterbacks. They went out and made a move for Jimmy G, and it worked for a little while. They went out and made a move for Trey Lance. Didn't work out, right? They've had other quarterbacks on the roster. Yeah, they got lucky and landed Brock Purdy. You got to give Kyle Shanahan a lot of credit for what he did, but there's been teams that have won games by way of the defense, including the Raiders, who beat the Chiefs on Christmas by way of defensive touchdowns and a strong defense, right? I mean, it's just that simple. Do I think that that's a great recipe long term? No, but we've had discussions on this show about different teams that have got it done with that kind of a recipe. So it's just, to me, it's almost like, hey, break down your team, tear down the defense, make sure you go get a quarterback that's going to be your guy, and that's going to be better than actually having at least one area of your team that is super strong. The roster offensively is really good. They've got really good players on the offense. There's two questions that I have when it comes to the offense. I mean, and this is something that I talked about on my radio show, Unnecessary Roughness, on Tuesday. Where would you rank the Raiders roster, take the quarterback situation out of it, in the AFC West? And I ranked them second. I think that they're the second best roster in that division, again, taking the quarterback situation out of it, behind the Chiefs. And the only reason that I have them second is because I think there's unknown at the running back position and there's question marks on the offensive line. Outside of that, I think the defense is right there toe-to-toe with the Chiefs. I think the wide receivers are toe-to-toe with the Chiefs. Right, I have no problem with those guys, and we'll see what else. The tight ends, I know that Travis Kelce is an elite tight end, but the Raiders have two tight ends, so sometimes two could be better than one. Right, that's another weapon adding to the receiving core. And I'm not saying those guys are better than Travis Kelce. I'm not, that's me talking with silver and black glasses on if I was doing that. But they have an opportunity. So again, that's why I rank them second. Denver, I think that we can all agree that their roster is fourth in the AFC West. And the Chargers I put at third because there's so many questions there, right? They don't really have an established number one wide receiver. They don't really have a proven running game. They have a new offensive coordinator in Greg Roman, who what we saw him do in Baltimore was do nothing but run the rock. Now, I know that they've went out and dressed the offensive line. I get that. They have an elite quarterback in Justin Herbert. I get that. Right, but there's holes along that Chargers team as they got rid of a bunch of players as they were trying to get their salary cap turned around. So I don't think the Raiders offseason was as bad as Seth Walder had to say. I hate that I'm going on vacation because I really wanted to get him on my radio show to kind of break it down and explain. You know it all the time. I say, well, let me hear what this person has to say, what was going into their thinking when they were breaking these things down. And I can read what he wrote, but I like to hear what he had to say more often. And I like to ask my own questions and get the response. But I'm still trying to wrap my mind around how the Raiders, who actually kind of quietly had a very good offseason with the additions that they made to the team and the way that the roster is built right now, and not to mention the coaching staff that they brought in. And I know that doesn't really have anything to do with it, but I could tell you that the coaching staff is solid as well. I don't see them as having the 31st ranked offseason in the National Football League. There's no way that they got a D, not in my world, and I don't think in your world either, but feel free to let me know. Of course, 707-654-4693. That is the number. Your calls and texts are coming up in segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with a call from Drewster100. I think I'm sure I'm getting his name wrong, but it kind of sounded like that's what he said. It got a little mumbled up. I know it's from the 510. He's calling to talk about the quarterback conversation when it had to do with Aiden O'Connell and Dak Prescott. Here he is. Call out the 5 1 dime. I think it's Drewster 100, but don't quote me on that. Here's the call.
Yo, what up, Q? This is Drewster 100. Yeah, I just want to talk to you about your show today with Dak Prescott or going with a quarterback in the draft. Look, AOC is not bad, and he's done a lot since he was thrown into the fire. I feel like with him being thrown into that fire, he's golden, man, and he's done a good job. I mean, that 3-0 loss, by the Vikings was kind of embarrassing, but other than that, the kid showed a lot of enthusiasm, and he's always ready to learn. I like AOC. If AOC can be more mobile out the pocket and make a play, and I feel like he'll be a threat among other QBs. Dak Prescott, I feel like if we pay somebody $60 million or whatever, man, he's got to take us to the. At least we got to be winning the AFC Championship, hands down. You know what I'm saying? Or at least getting there. But I just don't see us paying that much for him, even though he has a good resume. That Green Bay loss was pretty embarrassing. That's bringing me to the QB in the draft. I feel like we need to keep trying to hit with the QB, younger, stronger, better arm, eager to learn. Take him on a rookie deal. Hopefully he can take us to the promised land. But that's all I got, Q. You have a good day, and happy late Father's Day, man.
Hey, thanks so much for the call, my man. I appreciate you. And again, I apologize off top for getting your name wrong. I'm sure I got your name wrong. But as far as the call is concerned, if you're paying that quarterback $60 million, you're spot on. I hope he's making that run and taking you to the promised land. I think that's a lot of money. I actually had a really good conversation on Tuesday with Nick Shook from NFL.com. He actually does quarterback rankings each and every week in the National Football League, for the league. Great conversation on quarterbacks. So I'll actually have that on one of my best of shows that I have while I'm on vacation, so you can actually hear that conversation. I thought that was some fantastic stuff. But yeah, man, if you're making that $60 million, it's funny. I walked around the radio station building and asked everyone, is Dak Prescott elite? And 9 out of 10 people were like, yeah, he's an elite quarterback. I didn't see it. And I also said, maybe I'm wrong. I don't mind being wrong, right? I'm going to stand on what I believe. I don't believe Dak Prescott is elite, but maybe a lot of folks' definition of elite is different than my definition of elite. I don't see it. I'm hoping that Aiden develops into that guy. He's in a really good situation right now, going into the second year of his deal. And, of course, it's a rookie deal. And, yeah, if he could be that guy, that'd be fantastic. But that's up to him to prove it. And, obviously, when the Raiders get to training camp at the end of July, will be the opportunity he has to start to prove that he could be that guy. We'll see what happens. Obviously, there's a lot that's got to happen for him to solidify that. But I'm really hoping that that's what ends up happening, or the Raiders decide, okay, maybe he's not the guy, but we'll dip back into the draft and try to find our guy. I just think that $60 million for Dak Prescott seems like a whole lot of money, but some people have made the argument, if you feel like you're just that quarterback away, then the price tag is worth it, right? How much would you pay for a championship? And if you feel like he's going to give you that, as you mentioned, right, $60 million better get you to the promised land. That's what I'm saying. If the Raiders or any other team were to pull the move like that. Thanks so much for the call. I do appreciate you. Got a text from DJ in South Central LA, pretty lengthy text. He says, what's up, Q? I'm really irritated by the amount of fans who are freaking out on the offense of the Raiders based on what they're doing in OTAs and minicamp. Let me say that a little louder. It was OTAs and minicamp. For one of your callers, who shall remain nameless, to call and say that the Raiders are going to be a 5-win team, and also anyone predicting that they'll be a 10-win team based on how they're practicing in June, is bananas to me. The Raiders are implementing a brand new offense that both quarterbacks and most of the offense besides Devontae are learning for the first time. How can anyone accurately evaluate the team in June? I know our fan base is passionate. I know the Raider Nation could be. I've been a part of it for almost 50 years. However, we have to slow our roll. They haven't even made it out from their first cuts yet. At least don't start making predictions until, at the very least, preseason. Even that's too soon in my book. Thanks for your time, Q. Love the show. Raiders. That's DJ from South Central LA. Thanks so much for the text. And yeah, I mean, look, it's not a big deal to me. And, it's going off of gut feeling for Raider Nation or whoever's making predictions. If they think, the team is a 5-win team, okay, right? I think that they're more talented than that. They showed last year that they are more talented than that by winning 8 games. And they went through a whole lot of circus acts, right, to get the 8 wins last year. So when I make the prediction and say I feel like that they're a 9-win team, maybe a 10-win team, somewhere in that window, a small window, I feel like I can accurately say that without feeling like I'm just throwing something against the wall and hoping it sticks, right? Just based off the defense, just like I talked about in segment number 2, the defense was really good in 2023. It got better. That defense is going to keep the Raiders in games alone. Now, that offense that you're talking about, it does have to develop. It is only OTAs and minicamp that we got a chance to see. We'll see the real meal deal coming up at the end of July when training camp happens, when we're out there consistently in Costa Mesa and get to see every single day, see how it's getting better every single day, see who's shining and who's not every single day, right? And then obviously the preseason, Minnesota, Dallas, the Niners, how that shakes out. Once the 53-man roster, plays out, then we'll have a better idea. But, for me, saying that I think that the Raiders are a 9-win, 10-win team, that's based off of what they did last year and me feeling like they did better this year. They're a better team than they were a year ago. And they don't have so much chaos going on with the coaching staff. They have a head coach that's going to be around. They have a coaching staff. They've got 29 coaches on the staff, right? They've got guys that, understand the vision. They share the same message. They all believe in each other. Like they have a lot to like. And obviously other teams do as well. They're feeling good about how the team worked and operated in the offseason. But I just think that the Raiders are in a better place and are definitely a better team than they were a year ago at this time. Thanks so much for that text. Really good stuff. Up next, got a call from Cole Region Raider. He's calling to drop a name that he hears nobody talking about right now at the quarterback position. He's still in college. Here he is, Cole Region Raider.
Hey, Q. This is the Cole Region Raider. All this talk about a quarterback and whether or not who's gonna win the starting job. Are they going to perform? Are we going to be drafting another one next year? I think a lot of that pivots on the line. However, there is a name I don't hear anybody mentioning, and I think the guy is he's a Raider through and through. He's mobile, he can run, he can throw and run. Look up Jackson Dart from Mississippi State. He's going to be a senior this year. He had a pretty good year as a junior. I think he went maybe 25 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. I'm throwing that out there from memory, maybe a little off on those numbers, but look him up. I think you'll like him. Go Raiders.
Cole Region, thanks for the call, my man. Yeah, Jackson Dart from Ole Miss. That's not a guy that I thought about, right? He's a guy that used to get talked about quite a bit when he was at USC, and then remember he transferred when Lincoln Riley got hired there at USC. He's at Ole Miss now with Lane Kiffin, good old Lane Kiffin. It's funny. I actually had to look up, listening to your call, his stats from last season because I did really forget. He kind of fell off the radar, but Ole Miss is a good team, right? Lane Kiffin has earned his contract extensions that he's received there, and Dart was good. Right, 23 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He also ran the rock for 404 yards, had 8 touchdowns to go with that. That's all in that Lane Kiffin scheme, right? And Raider Nation knows all too well about Lane Kiffin, or like the late, great Al Davis would say, Lance, right? So he's someone to pay attention to. Like I said, he wasn't on my radar. Thanks for bringing him up. I actually did another interview talking about quarterbacks that, that will be available in the upcoming draft. I did that interview a couple days ago on the radio. Maybe it was Monday. I think it was Monday on the radio show, and I have that as well for you. So, again, a lot of good stuff that I'll be bringing over the next few days during the Best Of shows just to kind of keep you entertained and, listening to some Raider talk, some quarterback talk, some, ifs and buts throughout the course of, the next few days while I'm on vacation so we can get right back at it and have some brand new shows. But I think some real informative conversations and interviews that you'll find intriguing. And so that's one of the conversations as well. Just talking a little bit, kind of early preview of potential quarterbacks to look for in the 2025 NFL draft, if in fact it ends up coming to that. Thanks so much for that call and great suggestion there on Jackson Dart from Ole Miss. Definitely appreciate the call. Up next, got a text from Colin from North Carolina. It says, hey, Q, it's Colin from North Carolina. For the question of what should the Raiders do if the franchise quarterback isn't on the team, I would contact the Commanders about Sam Howell. He put up some good numbers last year as a starting quarterback. He isn't afraid to sling it. He also has good mobility. With the Commanders now having Daniels for the future, I'm sure that they'd be good with a 3rd or 4th round pick. He just came to mind when I thought of your questions. Thanks. That's Colin in North Carolina. Of course, Sam Howell was a North Carolina quarterback, so you've seen him more than I have. I'm not big on Sam Howell. I'm just really not. But like I said, I know you've seen more of him than I have, so maybe that's someone that they look at. I know at one point Washington was hell-bent on he's a really good quarterback. He's going to be that guy. And I know he did some good things, and he does have some mobility. I'm just, like I said, for me and my money, I'm just not a big fan. But I think that whatever the Raiders decide to do with their quarterback position, if in fact the franchise guy is not on the roster right now, I think they'll probably exhaust all options. And that might very well be one of their options, Sam Howell. But thanks so much. And again, I appreciate it. Like I said, you being in North Carolina, I know you saw Sam Howell a lot more than I did. Thanks so much for that text, man. I do appreciate you. Got time for just a couple more as we close out the show. This one comes from Jordan in Oregon. He's also calling to talk about the quarterback conversation we had on the show. And it's something to think about moving forward. Here he is, Jordan in Oregon.
Hey, what's going on, Q? Jordan from Oregon. I wanted to call in and chime in on your podcast. I like the quarterback talk. It's been something I think it's been talked about a lot, but it also hasn't been looked at in the light of what you're bringing it up as far as kind of that where the Raiders could end up as far as their season total and be right back in that middle of the pack range. And honestly, that was a call I had made to you a few times, kind of in the off season before this last NFL draft this year, and just talking about like if they were to run it back, they had just we're going into free agency, acquired Minshew. The very first thing I thought of was, there's a very good chance we're going to end up kind of as a 500 team. Last year we had opportunities to win a couple more games and get above 500 with Aiden and the, kind of mixed bag there last year with Jimmy G and all that whole experiment that failed. And, I'd say they did the best they could with the situation. And so, in an ideal situation, Q, is that I think, the top end of Aiden O'Connell as far as what he could be, I don't necessarily know that's been exhausted yet in this quarterback search because he's got the size. He's definitely got the arm and the accuracy. I think it's just going to come down if he can put it all together and become a really, really efficient quarterback within his skill set. Some people would say that's a game manager. I've always kind of hated that because there's been some great quarterbacks that you'd almost have to say are game managers if they don't run it. And it's kind of a knock on. So in an ideal situation, you hope Aiden could become a better version of what he was last year and become, an efficient quarterback and kind of maybe propel himself into the talk of being able to be the long-term answer. But I think, where this conversation would become touchy is if he were to become, let's say, like a middle of the pack quarterback in the NFL, and then we were going to have to hit that point here in a few years to talk about paying him, which I know is really far down the road right now. But it brings me back to when the Raiders as a whole moved on from DC. I always thought in my head the plan was obviously to upgrade. I mean, you'd never really move on from any player without like a plan to upgrade. He wasn't ever by any means like in the very bottom end of all the quarterback play, but he just didn't warrant that contract of which Ziegler and company signed him to. And so I guess that's where this would become touchy is down the road here. Are we right back in the same spot where you're going to have to pay a guy big money? Because if that's the case, I'd say they just need to draft a quarterback literally every year and just consider this to be a developmental situation that we're going to keep drafting one until we hit. But that's my take. Peace out, bro.
Thanks so much for the call. And I think you're like me, man. You want Aiden O'Connell to be the guy. He's cheaper. He's younger. He's already in the mix, right? You also ideally hope he's so good that it's a no-brainer to pay him, right? That he's just that guy. And that's the other thing with Dak, right? I keep asking people if he's elite, and I'm sorry that I keep going back to Dak Prescott. I'm not trying to ram his name down anyone's throat. Like, I don't want you just to think that, oh, man, Q's like pounding tail for Dak Prescott. No, it's just that name keeps popping up because he's in a weird situation where the Cowboys haven't re-signed him. But I keep thinking about if he's elite, like some people have tried to tell me and convince me, why would the Cowboys let him go? Or why would the Cowboys not have signed him at least by now? And who knows? Maybe, halfway through listening to the show, they sign him. And then you're like, oh, well, you're wrong, right? Maybe I'll be halfway to Hawaii and all of a sudden get a notification Dak Prescott signs a long-term extension. He gets $60 million from the Cowboys. That very easily could happen. But if he's so elite, I just don't understand what's taking so long, right? They've been in this position. He's really got the Cowboys in a bad position right now. If he does not get a contract and get it signed before the end of the season, he literally is going to be an unrestricted free agent who cannot be franchise tagged, and he can walk. And then they're going to basically have to reset. Trey Lance is not the answer, and Cooper Rush is not the answer. So what would they do? That is a weird situation that you don't see around the National Football League too many times. I mean, hell, even Kirk Cousins got franchised a couple times before he walked from Washington, right? Kirk Cousins, you want to talk about a dude who's made a ton of money. That guy has made a ton of money. But thanks so much, Jordan, for the call. I do appreciate you. I got a text from King V in Logan, Utah. Said, Q, what it do, my boy? This is King V from Logan, Utah. Just wanted to chime in on the quarterback situation. I agree with you 100% and believe that we should go through the draft if we cannot, if Aiden O'Connell does not turn out to be that guy, or the guard dog have the potential to win games. But getting Dak is a bad decision when he couldn't get it done with 9 Pro Bowlers on his team. Would love to watch guys we have now succeed, but realistically speaking, we will still have to look for our franchise quarterback in the future. So fired up to see what we do. This is my second time reaching out. Love your show. I listen daily. Keep doing your thing, boy. That's from King V in Logan, Utah. He also said Raiders. Thanks so much for the text. And yeah, I mean, I've kind of gone over that a few times. Again, ideally O'Connell proves to be that guy, and he could be the franchise guy. Maybe Minshew all of a sudden turns into the second coming of Rich Gannon, and all of a sudden you got a very cheap, franchise quarterback. I think we know who Minshew is. The question is, who is O'Connell and what is his ceiling? Thanks so much for that text. We'll close out with one more call. I said the show was going to probably go a little bit longer. I apologize for that, but this will be the last call for a while since I'm going on vacation. It'll be best of shows from here on out. Bad Luck Ray out of Central Cali. That's the 559. He's calling to talk about the quarterback position and what he thinks about it and thinks about this year's upcoming team. Here he is, Bad Luck Ray out of Central Cali.
Yo, Q, just wanted to touch base with you on that quarterback thing. I think you hit the nail on the head with that one, brother. That one right there is kind of what I want to do too, man. I think as long as we can keep that elite defense intact, I just like the thought of the Raiders playing that old football, freaking hard-nosed football, you know what I mean? Sorry for the pause, I'm driving. But, yeah, so that hard-nosed football, man, like we're, just running the ball down their throat and letting the defense just bully. I mean, that's why I love what Antonio Pierce is saying with like, don't worry about our quarterback. You know what I mean? He's like, worry about yours because we got Crosby and freaking Wilkins coming after you and who knows what Kuntz and all, Wilson and all these other guys are doing. And that's not even mentioning our secondary. So, I mean, me, like you said, man, save the money off quarterback, try to get a QB during the draft, everything else, take care of offensive line, plug in those pieces, that are going to be, game changers, but yet cost effective. So, I mean, ideally, that's what we would do. But again, man, I'm no GM. I'm nobody to, really call shots on the Raider team, man. I just really wish I could see that old school hard-nosed football again from our Raiders, man. And it seems like our defense is going to be that this year. So, again, this is Bad Luck Ray out the Valley, Central Valley in California, man. And thanks for all you do, brother, and keep the hard work up. Peace.
Ray, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. I do like the image and the identity of this Raiders team and what they're working on, what they're trying to achieve, what they're working forward to, right? They've got that defensive first approach. Obviously, Seth Walder from ESPN, as I mentioned in segment number 2, was not a fan of that approach. But I think that is a good way to go. Obviously, you can win a bunch of games in the league with that strong defense, and it could take you far. You've just got to get, as I've mentioned, all year long. You've got to, and really, I feel like I've been talking about this since January. You've got to find good quarterback play. It's got to be consistent, and it's got to be good. Does it have to be elite? No. Does it have to be great? Oh, but it's got to be good and consistent, and the Raiders could win games. And I think Aiden O'Connell has a chance to show he can do good, consistent quarterback play. Gardner Minshew could show that he can do good, consistent quarterback play. And I believe that they can show it. They've got to prove that they can do it, and they'll do that in training camp, or at least they'll attempt to do that in training camp. Thanks for the call. Thanks for closing us out on this Wednesday. My final day in town. I'll be taking off. Me and the wife headed out to Hawaii, get a little week of rest and relaxation and recharge the batteries and get ready for the upcoming football season, right? It'll be here before you know it, training camp in Costa Mesa. I look forward to that, and it's just going to be full throttle from there on out, as it is each and every year. So for the rest of the time until I get back, matter of fact, I'll be back around July 1st. When I get back, it'll be all brand new shows, obviously, but in the meantime, in between time, have a lot of best of shows, great interviews that I've been able to have a part of, whether it's Raider players, the president of the team, different analysts talking about the quarterback position and others. Lots of great stuff to bring to you over the course of the next few days. Little best of shows here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. So until we get back from vacation, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, love on your family, take care of your family, do what you got to do, get a little R&R yourself as well. And remember, as always, just win, baby.